Hey everyone, and welcome to the Darn Good TV Show's Part 1 of Season 1 recap. So for over 6 months, we've been airing this TV show's episodes, and we thought it would eventually be a good idea to make a short recap before we get started on the second half of Season 1. And this recap will in fact include spoilers, by the way, so if you don't want to hear them, now's your chance to get the heck out of here. And before we get started, we would greatly appreciate it if you'd subscribe to our channel. Alright, that's enough talking. Episode 1, and the first feature film, The Darn Good Escape. We are immediately thrown into a dangerous circumstance where a group of strange-looking people seem to be running from something. This is Sheila McCollum, empathetic psychopath, and that means someone who beats people up while getting attached to them. And this is Professor Leopold Attenborough, mad scientist who blew up his neighbor's house with his crazy antics. Together, these two are the leaders of a gang of lunatics who run from the law, and we'll get into who else is in their gang in a second. But first, this is Tom Garner. He's a kid who is just stuck in the wrong place at the wrong time. You see, little does Tom know that these people around him are being chased by the law. A warden van pulls up, manages to capture all of them, and bada bing bada boom, they're all gone, including Tom.
Wait, I'm innocent!
Tom, obviously being scared and confused, asks way too many questions, which I will answer in the shortest amount of time possible. Our characters explain that they are in fact not criminals, but lunatics, who are on the run because
the world isn't safe when we're in it.
Okay, we're moving along. This is Georgia Pleasance, an obsessive hobbyist, who at the moment is really obsessed with fashion design. This is Cello Steve, a concert cellist who went insane playing Pachelbel's canon and needs his cello with him at all times. This is Super Steve, an actor cast in superhero parts who went crazy and now thinks he actually is a superhero. This is Clara Layton, an artist who uses literally everything instead of paint to paint anything, anywhere. This is Dr. Wilfred Donald, the new guy. He was a very successful psychiatrist who went crazy from listening to too many crazy people. This is Jim and Bob Cobalt, the split personality. Do I really need to explain what this is?
Oh, don't say that. I already said it for both of us. How was I supposed to know? I was sleeping. Of course you were sleeping. You're always sleeping.
This is Barking Steve, a child who wanted a dog his entire life and at one point committed himself to being said dog. This is Fizzy, a hippie. And lastly, this is Fred. There really isn't much I can say about Fred. He's just Fred. Concluding our 12-person cast of good guys, let us now introduce the bad guy, the Commandant. And this is his right-hand man, Big Boss Warden. In the van, they explain that they have escaped many prison camps before, and that this one should be a no-brainer. Immediately upon arrival, they try to figure out how to escape, coming up with huge convoluted plans. Meanwhile, Tom is trying to convince the Commandant that he is actually just a sane kid who was accidentally kidnapped by the wardens. Oh, and also, Fred makes himself a paper safety medallion that he can wear around his neck to be, quote-unquote, invincible. That's important later in the story, I promise.
I'm invincible now.
The lunatics have come up with the idea of digging their way out, and they immediately get to work. A montage is played, and progress is already being made on the tunnel, while Tom, still begging the Commandant to believe him about his sanity, starts to lose hope. However, Tom isn't completely against the lunatics, because the more he's around them, the more he starts to get attached. The Commandant finally checks the records, realizes that Tom is sane, and lets him go. Tom, now fully attached to his new friends, strangely declines the offer, pretending to be insane. Getting ready for their great escape, they pick a time and date, and pack up all their things. With high hopes of their master plan, they mistakenly think too fast, and what else could happen? They are found out. Big Boss Warden stumbles upon the tunnel due to Fizzy playing his bongo drums down inside it. Upset at their failure, the nuts start to blame each other, and pretty soon, a full-scale brawl breaks out, for which Cello Steve kindly plays the soundtrack. After this downfall, Georgia says some words of encouragement, and they pick themselves up and get back on their feet. After some more brainstorming, Cello Steve and Doc walk into the barrack, covered with dirt, explaining that their tunnel leads out into a clump of stinging nettle. The rest of the group, ecstatic that they secretly built a second tunnel, repacks their belongings and gets ready for the great escape. Using a telephone booth as a decoy over their new tunnel entrance, they somehow manage to escape, but before all of them are out, Big Boss Warden and his men discover their absence and charge after them.
Mayday, Prof, we're discovered!
Run for it, every man for himself.
Super Steve manages to fly out with Clara on his back, and Georgia somehow escapes with the unlikely help of Barking Steve, Fizzy, and Fred. Once outside, our heroes immediately split up. The Professor, Tom, Cello Steve, Fizzy, and Fred in one group, Georgia and Jim Bob in another, Super Steve, Clara, and Barking Steve in the third, and Sheila and Doc in the fourth. After 4 small adventures, in which Fred unfortunately gets captured because he thought that his safety medallion would keep him safe, and it turns out he isn't actually invincible.
Overtake me! There's nothing you can do! Well, there goes Fred.
In which Jim Bob proposes to Georgia after saving her life.
Why don't you go back to that proposal of yours, Jim? I'd like to hear how it ends.
Well, for starters...
in which Barking Steve talks in human speech to save his companions' lives.
Oh boy.
Hide in the bushes!
And in which Doc beats up a massive warden to rescue himself and Sheila. The group, now all together, walks the last stretch to freedom. Except without Fred. They no longer run from the law, but together they colonize the free land and create a little place called Hollywood. Let the credits roll. Episode 2. The Darn Room. 4 or 5 years after the Darn Good escape, Sheila goes on a solo mission to finally rescue Fred. She talks about a plan to start something called an underground railroad, which is an expression that means
them's as is out goes back and gets them's as is still stuck.
So basically, it means to go rescue more lunatics who have had the misfortune of being locked up. On her way, she gets caught and meets the new and more dangerous commandant, the best of the best, the bad guy. Sheila is then thrown into a cold cell that they call the Room. There, she meets Marlon McQueen, an actor who believes that he is always acting, no matter the circumstance, and also Barking Sam, a dog who thinks he's a dog, and lastly, the prison guard warden, Captain Stryker Donald, Doc's younger brother. Sheila can tell that Stryker is on the verge of going insane, given away by his outbreaks of emotion, and right before the changing of the guard, Marlon stares down Stryker, making him unlock the cell and help them escape.
Alright, come on.
There's also a side plot with Tom and Barking Steve, who are trying to save Sheila but who eventually get caught and locked up.
So we'd like to know if they've already escaped, but there's no need to go check on them or anything if they haven't. If they have, we'd just like to know which way they went, and if they haven't, then we'll head on out and you can forget which way we went.
Look, let's just say we're wardens and we're here to relocate them.
Let's just say it.
Yeah, let's say it, because I don't really want to lie.
This wasn't shown between episodes, but before the next one, the two did fortunately make it out. Roll credits. Episode 3. Get on Board. After rescuing Stryker, Barking Sam, and Marlon, Sheila is now more cautious with throwing herself into unplanned missions because of the possibility that herself and her companions could also get locked up or in worse danger than before. She reads in the newspaper that a super spy, under the order of Vutza McCollum, is also rescuing lunatics. At this point, the audience should understand that there is a mastermind behind the rescuing of nuts by the name of Vutza McCollum. He's Sheila's dad, and no one has ever seen his face, and that's why it's so hard to catch him. Back to the story. Sheila gets a letter in the mail from a Miss Ruby Shoes Jones that says she has a nut that needs rescuing.
This Ruby Shoes Jones needs our underground railroad.
We don't have an underground railroad. We don't do that professionally.
Sheila cautiously says yes, and brings along Tom and Barking Steve. They meet Miss Ruby Shoes Jones and the lunatic, called the Plottle. After a minute or two, it's revealed that Ruby is actually Joanne Sturgis, the director of escapes and the super spy who works for Sheila's dad, Vutza.
I hear this Sturgis knows my dad. Kinda anxious to meet her.
That's not all she knows.
Well, where is she? What does she even look like?
Like that. She's me.
Also, the three rescuers start to really understand what a plottle really is. He's a dancer who cannot stop dancing. Barking Steve and Tom start to get more comfortable with the two, but Sheila is still cautious, as if at any moment it could prove a trap. Back to the escape. The most efficient way to rescue the plottle would be by train. Unfortunately, they can't just grab the plottle and get the heck out of there, because there is one final show that Sturgis and the plottle are scheduled to perform. The second problem is that in this city, there is a government curfew, and by the time the show is over, all the trains will have stopped running, preventing any individuals from leaving the city by night. Sturgis, already being a double agent, is actually doubling as the commandant's girlfriend. She convinces him to take off the curfew by asking for a moonlight date outside of town for that night so that the nuts can escape by train. Meanwhile, Sheila starts to get suspicious and decides to leave, taking Barking Steve with her, and Tom and the plottle are captured by wardens and hauled away in a warden van. Barking Steve sees the capture, tells Sheila, and the two go to rescue them.
Why didn't you say so? Come on! I forgot! I'm sorry!
After a small brawl in a van, they successfully rescue Tom and the Plottle with Sturge's help. Once they return, the Plottle is sung to sleep with a small musical number, and our characters rest for the following day. Opening night. The night of the escape. The theater is filled, and right before Sturgis and the Plottle are going on, the Commandant shows up and tells Sturgis that if she wants the date, then they need to leave immediately. Sturgis explains to Sheila that she needs to leave, and Sheila must take Sturgis' place, dancing with the Plottle.
How are we gonna get out? I'll explain that to Tom while you're on stage.
After some convincing, Sheila gets thrown on stage, while Sturgis and Tom try to stall the Commandant from leaving so soon.
The car is right here. If we can make it that far, we might actually make it to the train station on time.
Alright, let's go, darling. Oh, my ankle! Oh, I think it's broken. Carry me, darling.
And Barking Steve takes care of the wardens who are snooping around backstage and are endangering the Nuts and their plan. Once the show ends, Sheila, Tom, Barking Steve, and the Plottle escape, and they quickly get to the train by stealing the Commandant's car, thanks to Sturgis stalling him. They get to the train station, wreck the Commandant's car, and escape. Credits roll. Episode 4. Go West, Young Nuts. Sheila, now excited and fully willing to rescue other lunatics, goes on a solo mission to rescue 3 young nuts who have just escaped from a loony bin in Georgia. She riskily flies across the country and searches the city of Atlanta for safe houses where they might be hiding. This is Secret Agent. She's got a secret agent complex, and uses random objects for communication devices. This is Hypochondriac McQueen. A hypochondriac, a person who thinks he's sick all the time with every possible ailment. This is Stevie McQuinski, the foodie, a health nut and a sweet tooth rolled into one. Right as they're about to walk across the entire country, Sturgis pulls up in a stolen warden van to help them escape by car. Right after they leave, they are immediately followed by another warden van and realize that they've been discovered. Instead of going all the way to Hollywood, they are scheduled to hand these nuts over to a nut in Albuquerque, New Mexico, named the Thigh Man, who will help take care of them. After a small montage of traveling through the states, they finally make it to the final stretch, and with the help of Super Steve on the phone, the cup.
Please come in. Hello?
Hello!
He distracts the wardens following them by telling them to turn left immediately. Yep, it was that easy.
This is helpful Warden Bob. Turn left immediately.
Okay.
Once they make it to Albuquerque, they find the Thigh Man, who is actually there to betray them and take all of them back to prison. Barking Steve interrupts a face-off between the bad guys and our heroes, and Sturgis narrates the fight for him.
Oh, wait, hold everything. Warden Mo and Warden Joe are entering the ring. They're neck and neck as they trip over the threshold.
Wait,
Little do they know what's waiting them on this side of the fence. Conriac will show them the meaning of the word sick. You'll never take us alive!
who's that?
Conriac and Sheila beat the heck out of the Thigh Man and a couple of his sidekick wardens, Mo and Joe, with the sudden, unexpected help of Marlon McQueen. After the fight, Sheila realizes that the 3 young nuts were meant to live on the road and leaves them to live happily ever after. Oh, and throughout the episode, Hypochondriac speaks of his twin brother by the name of Terrence McQueen, who sounds like he's a daredevil of sorts. Just keep that in mind for later episodes. Roll credits. Episode 5. A Super Darn Good Escape. Sheila now takes Super Steve on a mission to save a nut by the name of Clark Kent, who is super obsessed with antiques. He is said to have been fired from his job, and his home was going to be searched because of some anonymous tips of his antique obsession. When our characters make it to the safe house where he is hiding, Sheila explains to Super Steve that his name is Clark Kent. Super Steve immediately gets upset because
His name is Clark Kent. What if he's actually Superman? There's no room in Hollywood for 2 superheroes.
after they meet him, Super Steve tries to get Clark Kent to admit that he is actually Superman, but Clark always denies this statement, explaining that he has no super abilities.
Can you fly?
I mean, in an airplane.
Can you catch a bullet with your bare hands?
My bare hands?
Clark, do you have anything you want to bring with you?
Like a super suit?
No, a 1940 suit with silver threads in my socks.
Meanwhile, back in Hollywood, Barking Steve accidentally locks Tom in a closet. Having nothing else to do, Tom decides to start cleaning up. He begins sorting and picking up the gang's prisoner files, and starts to get worried when he notices that he's the only sane person living with all these lunatics. Back to the main story. Sheila, Super Steve, and Clark are just about to leave the safe house when they see a warden waiting around the house for no reason. He's not waiting for anything or anyone, but looks awfully suspicious. Only thing is, it's not just a normal warden. It's the adjutant, the personal warden assistant to the commandant himself. The three obviously can't leave now, because they would definitely get caught. They try to come up with some disguises, but decide to just try to wait the warden out. Meanwhile, Barking Steve keeps trying to find the keys to the closet, while Tom starts to freak out because he realizes he's the only sane person in their quote-unquote family. Barking Steve gets worried and calls Sheila and explains Tom's symptoms. Sheila tells him that Tom has cabin fever, and the only way to save him is to get him out as soon as possible. So poor Barking Steve keeps looking for keys. Back to the safe house. Instead of impatiently waiting long amounts of time for the warden to stop watching them, our three heroes decide to speed up the time by time travel. Just kidding. They just get drunk.
Here it is.
Dragon fruit?
Hey, whiskey, you're the devil, you're leading me astray.
After some partying, and surprisingly no brawls, Sheila goes to bed, as does Clark, and in the middle of the night she wakes up to find a still drunk Super Steve wallowing in self-pity over the fact that he thinks that Clark is Superman. Sheila tries to cheer him up, and then hears a noise from the other room. She goes to inspect it while Clark and Super Steve talk. When she doesn't return, the two go to find Sheila, but are surprised when they find the Commandant himself in the safe house, holding Sheila captive with the adjutant at his side. He tells the two to sit down and behave, or he will hurt Sheila, and the two obey, much to Sheila's annoyance.
What are these two superheroes going to do with their damsel in distress? They're going to sit down and behave like good boys.
The Commandant and Adjutant step outside to deposit their feisty prisoner in their truck before coming back to deal with the two boys, and they leave Clark and Super Steve pretty hopeless. After a smaller side plot scene with Georgia, Tom is still losing it, but then, at the very last, picks up one more file that has escaped his attention until now. It's Sturge's file, and she is sane just like him.
Name, Tom Garner. Idiosyncrasy, sane. Name, Joanne Sturgis. Idiosyncrasy, sane.
He takes this as a comfort, and Barking Steve finally finds the right key and opens the door to find that Tom is now perfectly fine. Back to the safe house. In their darkest hour, Super Steve and Clark get to talking, and Clark explains that his name is Clark Kent only because his parents were avid superhero fans. His real name is actually Clark Kent Vishnevsky. Super Steve is overjoyed that he isn't actually the real Superman, and is suddenly overcome with incentive to save Sheila, and he runs out of the house with Clark at his heels. They get outside right before the Commandant and Adjutant get Sheila to the truck, and they storm onto the porch to save the day. Unfortunately, about 2 seconds into their rescue, Clark is shot, which gives Super Steve the incentive to force-choke the Adjutant, while Sheila takes care of the Commandant. The three successfully escape, and when they get back to Hollywood, it is revealed that Clark is actually alive, for even though the Adjutant did shoot him, to his surprise, he apparently caught the bullets. Also, over the course of this episode, the character of the Adjutant has been very strange. He keeps repeating the words,
Let's kill them. Let's kill them. Let's kill them.
over and over again, even though he knows that killing a lunatic unjustly is illegal. Sheila is very suspicious of him, and right before they leave, she realizes that he is in fact also somewhat crazy.
Wait a minute. He reacted to you force choking him. Nobody reacts to that unless they're... That guy's a nut.
We don't have any time for any more rescue, Sheila! Get in the car!
He is a villain who has malfunctioned, you might say. So just keep that in mind for later. Roll credits. Episode 6. Parry and the Plattler. Our story starts out, this time not following the nuts, but following a warden. This innocent warden, by the name of Bill, is called into the Commandant's office for a talk. He is told that he must prove his worth in the Commandant's division, otherwise he will be transferred to the border under the jurisdiction of Director Wallach in Mexico. Bill must prove himself by successfully kidnapping one of the nuts in Hollywood alone. This is a very difficult mission for one man, but Bill has high hopes. Back in Hollywood, Sheila is playing fetch with Barking Sam using her hat, when all of a sudden her hat is missing. She glimpses a young girl take it, and she realizes it's been stolen. She storms back up to the house to talk to Sturgis about it, and Sturgis tells her,
Well, you're lucky. Butsa put a tracker in that hat so we'd never lose you.
just a reminder, Butsa McCollum is the mastermind behind the rebellion and also Sheila's dad. Sturgis and Sheila go to find the hat, leaving the Plottle behind to take care of himself.
Oh, don't you worry about me, Mama. No one could ever kidnap me.
The tracker inside the hat leads our two characters to an apartment building. They go inside, and who do they find? This is Parry, an orphaned kleptomaniac. Well, not just a kleptomaniac. She is the parallel universe where all the lost things go. So she holds all the single socks, wallets, phones in the world, etc. This is Clove Armstrong, an animist, someone who thinks that all objects have feelings and emotions. She adopted Parry as her little sister, and the two make a living by stealing others' property and selling it in a pawn shop. Parry admits to stealing Sheila's hat, but explains that she thought it was lost. Back to the bad guys. Bill is getting ready for his kidnapping, and after a small suit-up scene, he gets in his van and very sneakily arrives at the house, and surprisingly, actually successfully kidnaps the unsuspecting Plottle. Back to Sheila and Sturgis. As they are meeting Parry and Clove, and getting to know them better, it is revealed to Sheila that Parry is the parallel universe, and that Clove is in fact crazy but believes that she isn't. Sheila and Sturgis ask if the two girls would like to be rescued and taken back to Hollywood. Parry is willing, but Clove declines for them, explaining that
we're in the middle of an extremely important rescue ourselves. We have a lead on Parry's parents, and we're going to try and rescue him.
Parry asks Sheila and Sturgis if they could help with the rescue, and after some conversation, the four girls team up. Their plan is simple. Rescue Parry's parents, and then they can all go live in freedom in Hollywood. In the Commandant's office, Bill, not so carefully, drags the Plottle in and explains that he has successfully kidnapped one of the nuts from Hollywood. The Commandant is hesitant to let this prove Bill's worth, however, and explains that he must keep the Plottle guarded as they wait for the official prison guards to come pick him up. Bill keeps his hopes high and ties up the Plottle in the break room.
Yes, sir. I'll never let him go, sir.
Thank you, sir!
Back to the apartment. Clove and Parry explain the rescue plan to Sheila and Sturgis, which relies heavily on the help of several of Clove's friends, random objects that she believes to be sentient. Clove then explains that she is going to scout the prison one last time and make sure everything is perfect. And it's probably a good time here to explain that Clove doesn't get along with Sturgis, and especially with Sheila, very well at all. After she leaves, Parry and Sheila talk about what life is like in Hollywood and what Parry will do when she gets there. Meanwhile, Sturgis has a phone call with Barking Sam.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'll just have to get my news from you, little guy.
Clove gets home and explains that everything should work out perfectly until they suddenly get a call from Butsa McCollum himself. He breaks the news that the Plottle has been kidnapped. But luckily, we find out that both Parry's parents and the Plottle are being held in the same facility. The plan is immediately changed so that they can rescue him also. Speaking of the Plottle, we see that he is tied up in the break room with a bag over his head. Bill tries to be intimidating, but fails.
Behold me, Bill.
You don't look like much of a kidnapper.
And explains to the Plottle that if he fails to guard him, he will then be sent to Mexico to serve under the old hag, Old Lady Wallach. Bill explains even further that Old Lady Wallach is a terrible old woman who only lets her wardens eat once a day and takes out all her anger on a bunch of little orphan boys. He then explains that he would like to become the ruler of all commandants and fire the old hag and give donuts to everybody.
I'll work up the corporate ladder, become the leader, and then we can have donuts for everyone.
Well, good luck with that.
The following day comes, and the girls go over their rescue plan, suit up, and leave for the base where Parry's parents and the Plottle are being held. Once they get there, Sturgis breaks off to find the Plottle, and Clove goes inside a building where Parry's parents are being held, leaving Sheila and Parry as lookouts. Bill leaves the Plottle unguarded for a second to go get his donuts, which have just arrived. That second just so happens to be the same second in which Sturgis rescues the Plottle.
I'm here to rescue you.
Thank you. I never thought that guy would stop talking.
What guy?
Oh, just some word. It doesn't matter.
Back to Sheila and Parry, who are talking about Parry's parents. Parry explains that she has never actually met her parents because, in fact, the parents that Clove are rescuing are two that she picked out for Parry, and that these parents aren't even insane. Sheila, now upset, bursts inside where Clove is rescuing Parry's parents, with Parry following behind. The audience now realizes that Parry's parents are actually salt and pepper shakers, because Clove thinks that objects are a suitable replacement for living, breathing humans. Sheila and Clove get into a fight and yell at each other, bringing attention to themselves. And who else is to walk in and investigate what's happening? The Commandant.
What is the meaning of this?
Well, you see.
Luckily, Sheila and Parry make it out, but Clove, now in imminent danger of being recaptured, betrays her companions as a means of escape, using the prize of catching a McCollum, the daughter of the elusive Vatsa McCollum himself, as a bait that the Commandant can't resist.
Did she just rat on us?
You, stop right there.
Yo, home run for it! Come on!
The Commandant rushes out the door and chases after Parry and Sheila, all while the now-knowing Bill is chasing after the Plattler and Sturgis. Bill calls the Commandant and explains that the prisoner has escaped, and after a small conversation, the two get back to the chase.
I'm kind of in the middle of a chase myself.
You are, sir?
It doesn't matter, Bill. Just get them before they escape.
Parry and Sheila meet back up with Sturgis and the Plattler, and the four escape together. Bill and the Commandant now meet up and realize that the prisoners have all escaped. Bill is transferred on the spot by the Commandant because of his failure, and our four characters escape without Clove, who seemingly has been left to her own nasty devices after she was a traitor and tried to betray her friends. Roll credits. And that's it. 6 episodes complete so far, and another 6 are yet to come over the remainder of the year. Thank you all so much for watching, liking, and subscribing. And if you aren't already subscribed, we'd greatly appreciate it if you would. We recently hit 100 subscribers and are very thankful to all of you. Second half of the Darn Good TV Show Season 1, here we come. You might want to keep your head down.